This is Diana Sullivan in Austin, Texas. Sometimes a pattern will tell you to pick up stitches along a side edge and work those stitches in ribbing. There are many books that show you how to do this when you hand knit, but I want to go over how to do this when you machine knit. The most important thing to do when you do this is pick up the stitches in a straight line. The stitches have vertical columns of V's, and you want to come along in between two columns. You do not want to go in and out at all, but you want to pick up along a straight line. If they tell you how many stitches to pick up, you can pull out that many needles and proceed to picking up. I will get a stitch on the far end, and my purl side must be facing me if I want the knit side to be the outside, and a stitch on the other far end. Then I go in and find the center and get a spot in the center. Now I am making sure that I am one full stitch from the edge. There are 2 strands of yarn over my tool. Then I like to split the difference and get one here, and then split the difference here and get one here, just making sure I have the 2 strands over my tool. You cannot have 2 needles in the same hole. Always make sure that there's yarn between the needles. And I pick those up. After I have picked them up, I will stretch downward and I will inspect to make sure that I am on a straight line. If you're not on a straight line, it won't look right. It's a little bit hard to see on video, but looking through it, with a little bit of light coming through it, I can see that this is the straight line right here. If you absolutely have to, you can put a flashlight behind it to get a better look. Now, what do you do if they don't tell you how many stitches to pick up? In that case, the general rule of thumb for stockinette stitch for your main fabric is to pick up 3 stitches and skip 1. If it's not stockinette, you're going to have to knit swatches and do some measuring and figuring. If they do not tell you how many stitches to pick up, a rule of thumb for stockinette is to pick up 1 stitch in each of 3 rows and then skip a row. So here I am getting that first row, and then there's just 1 strand of yarn between the hole I poked in and the next one, and 2 strands over the needle, and that's the second. And then again, 3rd row, 1 strand of yarn between these 2 stitches because I'm getting a stitch in each row. Then I skip this hole and go to this hole. So there's actually 2 strands of yarn here, and then it would be 1 and 1, and you see there I have picked up 3, and then I skip 1 and I pick up 1. Now I stop again occasionally and just look very closely and make sure that I'm exactly 1 stitch from the edge, just as before. You will notice as you pick up stitches using this method that you're stretching the yarn. You are stretching horizontally, in my case, toward my right, as I pick these up. That little bit of tightness is normal. It's what you want. You do not want the button band or whatever you're picking up to be saggy. Now that I've picked the stitches up, I'm pulling down firmly and I'm inspecting that I am exactly 1 stitch from the edge. You would think, as long as I've been knitting, that I wouldn't find mistakes when I do this, but I usually find some spot going across where I'm not exactly 1 stitch from the edge, and look right here, that's not quite the way I want it. So I'm fixing that one. The straighter I get this, the better it will look. Now before I get the ribber involved with this, I'm going to go ahead and do the pickup part of the job. I'll begin by bringing all my needles up to hold position, and I'm pushing the knitting back against the needle bed. My machine is not set for short rolling, but I'm going to go 2 full tensions tighter than my knitting was, and I'm going to use that tension for the ribber as well. I thread the machine and I knit across slowly, and it has picked up stitches all the way across. Now I have to transfer some of those stitches to the ribber to get ribbing. But before I do that, I want to weight the work. I like to weight the work when I do this with triangle weight hangers, and I just press them into the fabric, and then I'm going to hang a ribber weight in the holes in the weight hangers. I'm removing my ribber covers. I'm unthreading the machine, and I'm removing the knitting sinker plate, and I'm going to put on the ribber arm. I'm lifting the ribber up into place, and I'm going to go ahead and line up the ribber carriage with the main carriage. I need to thread the carriage, so I open this little gate, bring the yarn in here, and put it in place inside this finger in the ribber arm. Now before I can continue with making ribbing, I need to arrange the stitches for ribbing. I want knit 1, purl 1 ribbing, so I have pulled out every second needle, and those are the needles that I'm going to put on the ribber. And I need to be in regular pitch on my brother, that is P. That is, the needles line up with the ribber, and then I just transfer a stitch at a time down to the ribber, just like this. When my stitches are transferred on across, I'll come back and show you a few things to check before you begin. I take just a moment to make sure that my needle arrangement is correct and that I don't have any needles that should be out of work that are still sticking out in work. If I did, that would cause a problem. I check my ribber carriage. I want it to be set plain, and I want it on that same tension as my main carriage. In my case, I'm using tension 4. I take just a moment and check my main carriage and make sure it's on the right tension and it's for plain knitting settings. Now I just knit the number of rows that is the depth of the band, so I think I'll knit 8 rows. I am planning to bind this off using a loop through a loop bind off, so I'm going to put an extra row on very loosely. So I'm turning the tension way up, and then I'm going to knit across slowly. Now I'm transferring the stitches up to the main bed needles. I do this before I cast off. This is that final row of loose loops, and I'm going to do the loop through a loop cast off. I am just about to do the loop through a loop cast off, but 2 1-pound ribber weights is much too much weight, so I'm removing those. 1 little claw weight ought to be enough for this job. And I do this cast off the same way that I always do with my latch tool. Now you can use any cast off that you like. You could take this off on waste yarn and do a sewn cast off, or you might want to fold your band to the inside and sew down the loops to give a double ribbed band. That's especially nice for warm crew neck sweaters, to have a folded doubled ribbed band around the neck. Here's what we have, a terrific picked up edge. I'm just going to hook it on a gate peg and show you with my tool how straight this line is along here, and that's why the edge looks as good as it looks.